Do you like summer hot? Do you prefer to keep it cool? Or maybe you're neutral on this topic. Today, I'm sharing 6 color combinations perfect for kickstarting your summer card making. First, I'm coming in hot with one of my favorites that I'm calling Summer Heat. I've been wanting to try something ever since I got this new Groovy Flowers solid mask from A Colorful Life Designs. First, I'm going to blend some Limoncello and Tiki torch ink over top for my background. I don't need to worry too much about getting a super smooth blend here because the areas are small and the ink will smooth out as it dries. Now as I remove the mask, I want to remember how I had it positioned on my panel because I'm going to try and layer the older Groovy Flowers outline stencil over top in the exact same space. Then I can blend my other 2 colors, Party Dress and Flirty Fuchsia, onto the petals. I started with the Party Dress all over the open petals and then went back in with the Flirty Fuchsia just in the flower centers. I didn't worry too much about keeping that party dress exactly inside the petals, and I wondered, as you may be wondering right now, if doing it this way was any different than just using the outline stencil on its own. And I think the answer is almost yes. If I had put the outline stencil down first and blended the Limoncello and Tiki just in the areas around the flowers, I would have definitely gotten some yellow inside the flowers on the petals, mixing with the pink. So right now I have the orange around the flowers where the party dress mixed with whatever was behind it, but I have no orange on the inside of my flowers. Is that slight difference in the look worth the cost of the extra stencil? Only you can decide that. To finish this one, I spritzed the panel with shimmer spray and I splattered it with some gold watercolor. I stamped a very bold Simon Says Stamp sentiment over top in black ink, and I trimmed it down with a circle die. Since my sentiment was a little off-center, I decided to bring some black to the left side by offsetting my circle mat. This is a great way to add something easy but unexpected to a simple layout like this. Another unexpected touch was to use black sequins for my flower centers and then layer some pink gems on top. Alright, now let's cool things off with what I'm calling Pool Party. This one's another experiment. I've embossed one panel with the Simon Says Stamp Streaming 3D embossing folder, and the other panel is flat. I even wrote after on the back of the flat panel because I want to see if it makes a difference whether you emboss before you use watercolors or after. I placed both panels in my little acrylic box here that I used to catch excess powder and water, and I sprinkled 3 colors of powders on both panels. I had 4 out, but I only used 3, including my favorite Looney Toony Teal, Galactic Goo Green, and then Spill the Tea Teal, which is quite dark. That Galactic Goo Green is quite a yellowy green, and it'll add some lightness to the blends. I spritzed some water and tilted the box to try and get the pigments moving. I wanted some white space left, and I was interested to see that the embossing didn't seem to really prevent the color from moving. I set the panels aside to dry, and when I came back, I embossed the after panel with the 3D embossing folder. And there's not much difference, is there? The embossing is a bit crisper on the after panel, but really, without knowing which was which, I don't think anyone could tell the difference. So that was a disappointing experiment, and I'm not even really loving these panels. And when that happens, I always find that the best thing to do is to die cut them. I used the mid-century Ethereal cover plate to cut these down, and I created my own pattern of shapes. I also cut a white panel with the cover plate and backed each piece with a white piece to give some subtle, low-key dimension. As you can see, even running the panels through with the cover plate die didn't get rid of that embossing from the 3D embossing folder, and I love how that little sentiment on a white circle is sitting on the 2 blue half circles. When you put a lot of time into the background of a card, little sentiments like this one from Mama Elephant are perfect finishing touches rather than focal points. Next up is what I'm calling Pink Lemonade. This one's a puzzle. I'm using warm colors, lemon sorbet, cotton candy, and creamsicle, but they're so pale and delicate that they give a cool feeling. I'm doing another floral background, this time with one of the little stencils from a Tim Holtz set. I want a dreamy, creamy feel, so I used a soft hand with my blending brushes, and I circled around the outside of the petals, letting it fade into the center. I made sure to change the direction of my circles so that the bristles of my brush get full coverage over those petals. One thing I struggle with is creating a perfectly spaced, filled in, and yet random background. And although my preference would be not to clean the stencil and do a few yellow flowers before changing colors, I seem to always end up with awkward amounts of white space that way. So I cleaned the stencil each time and I moved it so that my next flower was close to the previous one. I tried to turn the stencil and mix up my colors along the way and keep my spacing pretty even. But if you kind of work from one corner down or from the center out, that also works well. And just do the shape next to the ones you've already done. You should have an easier time getting an even feeling background. This stencil has an inner image that gives some dimension, so I added that as well. And it wasn't as easy as I thought, since I had turned the flower each time. So I really needed to turn these inner petals as well to make sure that they fit. And also, since I had lightened up the centers of my flowers, I had a hard time seeing even where to put the petals down, even when I did have them lined up properly. Next, for my flower centers, I grabbed one of the other little stencils in the set, and I masked off the smallest dot before putting some solar paste through. This is a very soft gold pearly paste, and it is the perfect finishing shimmering touch. Now, I'm generally not a paste girl, mostly because I can't be bothered to get up and clean it all up fast enough. And I wasn't sure if I could do all the flowers at once without having to stop and let it dry. But the small stencil allowed me to get them all done at one time, and I noticed my technique improving even as I did these 8 or 9 little areas. So all that to say, don't be afraid of trying new techniques. It really doesn't take long to get the hang of them if you give it a fair shot. To finish this one, I trimmed the panel down and I stamped a happy sentiment with sandcastle ink so the contrast wouldn't be too harsh. I popped that up over a panel I had blended the cotton candy ink onto and embossed with the Altenew Dottie Circles 3D embossing folder, just for a little feminine touch. My solar paste centers are not perfectly smooth or even, but I think that's okay. The shimmer is a nice finishing touch. Next, let's get zesty. Citrus colors like lime, grapefruit, orange, and lemon are perfect for summer-themed cards. I'm using this clever tulip stencil from a Colorful Life Designs. See how the leaves are separated from the flowers? This means no masking around that place where the tulip meets the stem, and it also gives lots of options for patterns with just leaves or just tulips, but I'm not doing that today. I masked off the bottom leaves with some mint tape, and I started blending lime Rickey ink. For all my cards today, I had what I call an initial plan in mind. I knew the products and the colors I wanted to use for each one, but I find that cards sometimes take me in directions I hadn't expected. That's exactly what happened when I got to the tulips. I started with the flower on the left of my Coral Cabana ink, which is representing a grapefruit color. I blended the ink through the big flower, but it looked a little flat. An easy way to add dimension is to do some extra ink near the bottom, like I did here and also with the leaves, but I decided something a little more dramatic was called for. So I masked off one side of the tulip on a tilt, and I grabbed the spinning line stencil, which has stripes that kind of curve up the way the tulip would. I turned it to get the stripes sitting just right, and I put another layer of Coral Cabana through. That's kind of cool. So then I did the same with the orange and the lemon. This looks kind of unfinished, doesn't it? So I masked off the left side of each tulip, and I found stripes going in the opposite direction. And now I'm liking that more. The stripes give kind of a geometric feel to these organic tulips, but now the leaves don't match. This fix was a little simpler. I just masked off the top of each leaf and blended more lime Rickey at the bottom. So it's not matchy-matchy with the tulips, but it is in a similar feel with those straight lines. Blending your inks lighter and heavier, layering up stencils, and adding masking are 3 easy ways to add interest to a stenciled scene. Now to finish this one off, I couldn't really trim it down much because those 3 tulips pretty much take up the full width of a card. I put a black mat above and below the flowers, stamped a solid graphic feeling sentiment from Ink Blot Shop, and added some clear gems where my re-stenciling hadn't exactly lined up. My next combination is black and white. Hey, it's a classic and it can be used at any time of the year. I think the best way to make it summery is to choose summery or tropical images, like these pretty line florals from Technique Junkies. It's light and airy and super pretty. I'm trying out this red rubber stamp in my stencil and stamping tool that already has a waffle flower grip mat in it. And I have to say it's a little tight. Especially over on that left side, I'm feeling like I'm having to push down a little harder than I feel comfortable with. So while I made it work, I definitely recommend that you remove any thick grip mat you have and use either a sticky sheet or one of those mats that's like a Cricut mat when you want to stamp with red rubber. And while I was at it, I guess I thought I better just test it again. This time I stamped the Hero Arts Acanthus background stamp. This one is a denser design, and my plan was to use it as kind of a black mat around my florals. I stamped closer to the hinges this time, but I still feel like this combination is too thick, and I don't think I'll do it again. Plus, I ended up with my black ink on my grip mat. I know red will stain it, but I don't want black there, so I grabbed my Ultra Clean stamp cleaner. Remember, the grip mat really is just a big stamp, and it came up right away. I definitely wouldn't leave it too long. So here's what I was planning to do. I was thinking the contrast would be a little more than this, so I tried just pressing the edge of the floral panel into my black ink. Now this is Lisa Horton's solid black ink, and it's on a felt pad rather than foam, so the effect of doing this is more subtle. I still wanted more contrast, so I grabbed the acanthus image and blended some black ink over top. I thought I'd be smart and avoid getting black ink on the grip mat on my rotating platform, so I used a stencil mat, but this ink really stuck to this, and I had a hard time cleaning it off, even with the Ultra Clean. I trimmed it all down to a square, and I love how the mat now has the botanical pattern of the acanthus visible, but it's still acting like a black mat. There's no rule that says that your mat can't have a pattern on it. I added a black and white sentiment from Ultinew and a little black and white butterfly from Poppy Stamps, along with some clear gems. My final summer color combination is either sunrise or sunset. I guess it's sunrise, since there's not really a dark nighttime color. Does that even make sense? A while ago, I bought the Friendship Bracelet die set from Concord and Ninth. I mean, I loved how good everybody's cards looked, but secretly, I had my eye on those simple shapes. That grid of circles and squares, along with hearts and stars, basic shape like these often come in handy in multiples. But today, I chose the single chevron die to cover my whole panel. I put my 5 colors onto some card panels: Fiesta Blue, Cummerbund, Do-Si-Do, Coral Cabana, and finally Creamsicle. I let them dry before die cutting and die cutting and die cutting until I had 5 little piles of chevrons. When I'm building a background and I don't know whether I've got enough to cover my whole panel, I like to start in the center and then build out. I also like to put the adhesive down on the backer rather than trying to put glue on the back of each of the little delicate die cuts. I probably should have drawn a straight pencil line first because I ended up with a line of chevrons that had a little wobble in it, but I kept going, working left then right until I had 6 lines of chevrons. I trimmed my panel down to a square and I kept the stripes running vertically, since to my eye it was more obvious that they aren't straight when I had them horizontal. And then I had a few extras, which I could save, but let's face it, the likelihood of me needing 1 or 2 of these chevrons in these exact colors in the future is pretty slim. So I put the extras randomly onto the panel to give some subtle popped up dimension. This was another thing that wasn't part of my plan when I thought of this card, but it was a great opportunity to add a little something unexpected, as well as use up some of the extra die cut pieces. To finish it off, I used some other extra die cut pieces from the blue card. These were white half circles and quarter circles that I added color to and then created an unusual but fun sentiment focal area. Although again, I kept it pretty small so the background can really be the star of the show. If you were surprised by the black and white color combination for summer, you're definitely going to want to watch this video here, where I show how black and white can take you through the whole year. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.